Hi guys, it's Becky, and I wore this when I was doing one of my other videos, and I had some questions about it. Actually, from a couple of people who wanted to know if I had a tutorial for my skulls and roses bracelet that I was wearing. But I made this before I started doing tutorials, so I didn't have something that I could point anybody to. So I decided to go into my stash and pull out the rest of my rose beads that I got this like a big bulk package from Amazon, and I did the same with these skull beads. And I'll put a link to where I got them from, what the listing was on Amazon. I'll put that in the description below so you guys can grab that too if you want. But it's a pretty simple design. It's basically two needle right angle weave. We've done it before on some of my other jewelry designs. So it's pretty easy to do and to follow along with. And I'm going to be using some bone colored beading wire. This is the Softflex medium beading wire. I'm going to use some of the gunmetal color or the oxidized silver. Uh, the things, the crimp tubes. Sorry, my brain is like, Becky, no. I can't have you doing things. And I just got this skull button, and I thought that would make a really cool closure for the one that I'm going to make on camera with you guys. On my other one, I just had a little loop at the back and a lobster claw as a closure, and it works great like that. So you don't have to have a button for your closure. You can use lobster clasp if you want. It's just fine. I am terrible at doing closures. There you go. All right, so I'm going to put this on here so it's out of the way while we get started on this. Now you're going to need, for this bracelet, I have 40 of these the rose beads, and I have 19 skull beads. And I have a 7.5-inch wrist. So you might use less if you have a smaller wrist than I do. You might use more if you have a larger wrist than I do. It all depends on what size you're making for. So I'm going to go ahead and pull off about 24 inches of wire. That's a little bit more than 3 times around the wrist. And I'm okay if there's some extra at the end of this because I can always find things to do with leftover soft flex wire. Like you can use small bits for earrings. You can use little bits of it to beef up your crimps when you're making things with smaller diameter wire. It's pretty useful even with the leftovers and with the ends. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to grab both ends so that I know where the middle is. And I'm going to string my button on first thing. So if you're using like a lobster clasp or some other closure, that's what you would start with. And then I'm going to grab one of these crimps and I'm just going to attach my closure first. So you want both ends of the wire to go through your crimp tube. And as far as tools go, I'm using flush cutters to cut my wire, and I'm using a magical crimper for my crimps. I just prefer my crimps to be finished with a magical crimper because then I don't have to have a crimp cover. Okay, and that'll give it some movement right there. Let me grab my magical crimper because I think I might have used it on a different project yesterday. Yes, I did. It's right over here. Loop. So here we go. We're ready to go. I've got my skull. I've got my crimp tube. And the magical crimper, if you haven't seen it before, it has this concavity in the middle of it that's kind of round. And you're going to put the crimp inside of that and squish it flat. And then you're going to open and close it while you're rotating it so that these corners that get made get flattened down, and it turns it into a little smooth ball of crimp. And that's why you don't need a crimp cover. Because it looks nice and it's not going to rub against your skin. Okay, so to start this, I am going to put on one rose bead on each end of my wire. So one on that end and one on this end. And then I'm going to grab a skull bead. Now that I've got both of those down there, and I'm going to go through the skull bead, going in opposite directions so that the wires crisscross through it. For the first one, it doesn't matter which way the skull is facing. And I guess it doesn't really matter for the rest of them if you're okay with some of them being upside down. But for the remainders, I'm going to want to make sure that I've got my skulls facing the rest of the way. I will do that. You can too if you want. There we go. You can kind of just rotate it around because these beads are not round shaped. You can rotate it around so it faces the right way. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to put on a rose bead on each end of my wire. And then I'm going to put the wires through the skull bead. And so I've got this guy facing the same way as the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and put my wires through. That's the only real thing that you've got to pay attention with this. Otherwise, it's a pretty meditative make where you just do roses on each end and a skull in the middle. And you just crisscross the wires through the skull and keep going all the way until it is long enough to fit the wrist of who you're making it for, whether that's for yourself or for somebody else. And I'll show you how to finish this up after I get to the end. Just do my last little skull guy here on camera, and then I'll finish up the rest of it and let you guys time travel to the end. Let's see, it's a really simple yet really effective bracelet, and I think it's pretty. I like wearing it. It's beautiful. So I'm going to finish this up, get it to the length that I want, and I will join you right back here when I'm done. All right, so I've added all of the skulls that I am going to add for this bracelet, and there's a pretty significant gap on this one, so I decided to just make the gap a little bit smaller for this, and I added 20 skulls instead of the 19 that I did for this one. And it's fine because it's still going to fit me. It's just going to be a little bit more skulls and less skin on it for this. So I've got my 20 skulls, and that means that I'm using 42 roses, and I just need to add my last 2 roses here on either side, and then we are going to finish this off, and we are going to make a loop for the clasp, and the loop is what the little button is going to latch onto, or we're going to actually latch the loop onto the button when we do this. So now that I've got my last 2 roses, I'm going to bring my wire together. You can see that was a pretty good estimate of how much wire I was going to need. So I'm going to pull out one of these crimp tubes, and I'm going to put both strands of wire through the crimp tube, going in the same direction. Just snug that up against here. And I want to take one of these and pull it back into this tube. And there's enough room in the tube for 3 strands of wire. So it goes through like that. I'm just going to pull that tight so that we're moved in the right place. And now I want to make sure that this loop is not going to be too big, but that it will also fit around this, because I don't want it to just undo itself while it's on my wrist. So I'm going to grab this end down here and just start pulling it through. And when it is the right size, I will stop. So let's see if this will go around the button and if it'll stay. I'm just rotating it, pulling it, making sure that it's not going to come undone. And I think that is about the right size, because you want to still be able to get it on and off, but you don't want it to come undone on its own. I'm just going to pull this a little bit more taut. There we go. I think this might be a little on the small side, so let's see if it will still go on here, because I can readjust if I need to. Yep, it's a little bit on the small side. This is actually stretching it out so that it will fit while I'm doing this. Okay, so that's going to be the perfect size for that. I'm going to go ahead and crimp this now, right here, right now. Make sure. There we go. It's just readjusting my wires. I'm going to crimp it the same way by squishing it flat, well, flat with the concavity, and then rotating it so that I can get all of these sides smoothed down. Like that. And I'm just going to clip off my excess wire. I don't have too much excess. That's pretty exciting. And now I have a Skull and Roses bracelet. So yeah, I will put links to both of these items, the skulls and the roses, where I got this button from, and a link to the Softflex site where I got this bone-colored beading wire. And I hope you enjoyed this. And I hope that if you make it, that you enjoy making it and wearing it too. Have a great day.